back to another special episode of the Epic Experiment Podcast. I'm your host, Bruce. I've got my glass of scotch, and I'm joined on the line by Lux. How are you, buddy?
And I'm doing good.
Well, so how was the start of 2021? Did it kick off well for you?
And it actually did, and I just got good news tonight.
Oh, well, what sort of good news did you get?
And LGS is opening back up, so I get to keep my job.
Ooh, jobs are good. I hear you can exchange money for goods and services like an apartment or food or heat. All these things are good, correct?
Yep.
So I know we're making light of the situation, but you're right. Like if you don't have a job, it's hard to live comfortably and to do the things you like to do. So I'm glad you get to keep your job. I'm glad the LGS is going to be able to keep the lights on, and that the situation is maybe stabilizing where you are in the grand state of Texas. Up here in Ontario, we're locked down now. We've been locked down since Boxing Day, and we're supposed to stay locked down for a while, but we're not seeing the caseload drop at all or stabilize. It's just continuing to climb the mountain. And so, it's really concerning here. So just to put things in perspective, think of Ontario as being roughly the size of the population of Michigan. And right now our caseload is very comparable to that of Michigan, where for much of the summer and even the fall, our caseload was much, much smaller. And so now, over the last couple of weeks, it has grown, exponentially, as this thing is apt to do. So we have a problem here in Ontario, and we are locked down. However, I still think it's a good sight better over what's happening in Scotland and England, where they just got locked down, and my friends over there are in the midst of complaining bitterly about it too. So, welcome to 2021, where we're exactly the same as 2020. Let's hope the vaccine and the world goes back to normal soon enough, right, Lux?
Yep.
Oh, so tired of this crap. All right. Anyway, some housekeeping stuff. Don't forget, you can now find all our content over on thelotuscouncil.com. So that means you can find the podcast, you can find videos from them opening fun product, and they did a fun session with different types of dice you can open. They've got lots of good discussion in the Discord. There's going to be a push, I think, in the new year here to try and make their game matching or the game making channel a little bit more of a thing, to try and get people in and playing, connecting through the Discord. So come and check them out. Lots of fun, lots of great people loving to talk Magic, and in particular EDH. So come and check out thelotuscouncil.com. If you missed it, our video for the 31 Days of Christmas is live on YouTube. We will put the link to it in the show notes if anybody cares. You may not interest you in terms of who won our prize for 31 Days of Christmas, and congratulations to our winner. However, you may want to watch the video and laugh at the ridiculousness of the ending of the video, which is pretty hilarious in its own right. So, just saying, you may want to come and check that out, folks. All right, should we get started there, Lux? We got to sort of burn through some stuff since we started late tonight. So you ready to go?
Yep.
All right, so up first, we got Garbage or Great. And on deck tonight, we have Shamanic Revelation, which is a sorcery for 3 green. This is draw a card for each creature you control. And then Ferocious, which is when you have a creature with power 4 or greater, it says you gain 4 life for each creature you control with power 4 or greater. So, Garbage, Great. What do you think?
And I think it's great.
I think this is a great budget option. In terms of what it actually does, I'm not hugely in love with it because it feels like a bit of a win more card. I mean, so 5 mana to draw yourself a pile of cards is good if you have a board set up of creatures. If you don't have a good set of creatures, well, this 5 mana turns into 5 mana, draw 1, maybe draw 2. And that kind of feels bad, doesn't it, Lex?
And it does, but this is green we're talking about.
Well, it is, but green has now gone in a direction of having absolutely no trouble drawing cards. Like there's no trouble whatsoever. Like you get things like for one more mana, you get Rishkar's expertise. You get to draw cards, and then you get to play a 5-drop. Like you can do better for sorceries at this sort of converted mana cost level. So I mean, like I don't hate it. I think it's a really good budget option at 50 cents. That's what it looks like. Generally speaking, like Fate Reforged is like 50 cents. Commander 2016 is 57 cents. Commander 2019 is 59. So like it's in around the 50-cent mark. So it's a good budget option, which we love here on the show. But it's if you were looking to play this in sort of a big game hunter sort of way, where you're looking to like play bids against big decks, like this is not where you want to spend 5 mana. There are better ways to do this. But that said, I still am a rather big fan of this card. I think it's pretty good. I think it offers us quite a lot to draw cards. The setup, let's be honest, it is green, so you're going to have creatures. So it's really not outrageous, is it?
No.
No, not really. Like now, how relevant do you think that ferocious ability is, gaining life? How many creatures with power 4 or greater do you think you're going to have on the average battlefield with this in the deck?
And honestly, in considering in the kind of decks I build, normally around like 5 or 6, and give or take.
You're going to have 5 or 6 4-power creatures on the battlefield? Okay. Oh, that's okay. That's a little more than I anticipated. I sort of figured you might have 2, maybe 3, and you'd get 8, 12 life, which is significant. But if you're getting 5 or 6 creatures, and you're getting 24 life and probably drawing a half dozen cards, like that's big game. I can see why, if that's how you're constructed your deck, this would be appealing, and could do a lot of work for you for sure. Absolutely. Obviously, I think we're the sort of decks we're putting this in is a little bit different, isn't it?
Yeah.
Now, do you run a copy of Shamanic Revelation in any of your decks currently?
And no, I do not, because honestly, I can't seem to get a hold of a copy.
Oh. Here, Lux, we can fix that. We'll get Lux a copy of Shamanic Revelations, won't we, audience? We'll get him one, we'll send it to him, and let him put it in a deck. And then maybe sooner or later, Lux will be able to get himself a webcam, and we have to watch him play Shamanic Revelation against me and draw a pile of cards.
And I think you know which deck this card's going in.
Well, I'm thinking it goes with Samet personally, but it could go in your Abzan deck too, because if you're putting counters on things, you're going to be presumably making them bigger. And either way, I don't think either option's wrong. Where were you planning on putting this?
And Nethroy.
Yeah, your Abzan deck. So that sounds like fun. Yeah. Oh, Nethroy. So good. So good. All right. Is that anything we want to say? Anything else we want to say about Shamanic Revelation?
Yeah, no, not really.
I think we both came out on the side. It's pretty great, didn't we?
Yep.
Yeah, it's nice when we're on the same page. All right, segment 2. So we're gonna break this up into 2 segments. The first part we're gonna talk about is is call time previews, or the lack thereof. But Lux, what have we seen instead of previews?
And I've honestly been seeing a lot of leaks.
Yeah, and that's really problematic, isn't it, Lux?
I mean, it honestly is.
Yeah, so just so we're all clear on above board here, we're not going to talk about cards that have been leaked and that haven't been officially previewed by someone that Wizards of the Coast has contacted and asked to preview a card. There may be creators out there and podcasts out there that will touch on these cards, but I'm kind of of the opinion, I don't know where you stand on Lux, but I think the leaks are generally bad for the community. Would you agree? Lux.
And they are.
Yeah, they are. There's no doubt. They're bad for the community. So we don't really want to dive into these cards. And if some of them turn out to be real, then great. If some of them are faked or for subsequent sets, that's fine too, right? But the fact remains that these are super interesting cards, to say the least. And yeah, so I hopefully some of them turn out to be real, but we're not going to dive into them. Now, here's a question, Lux. So some of these cards have been leaked, and people have alleged that they've opened them in Commander Legends packs or in other sorts of packs. Do you think these are intentional, or do you think this is BS and people are actually just leaked by going dumpster diving or the information not being kept secure at the printers?
And honestly, from what I know, and I'm thinking that there's a lack of security at the printers because when whenever I think of and what's going on right now, and my mind always goes back to the Theros Beyond Death and leaks.
Well, I think worse than that. I think Oath of the Gatewatch leaks more than anything, where there was a preview, like a card preview to Kozilek, and the colorless mana like way in advance of the set actually releasing. So, but yeah, you're right. Like there's been a lot of leaks, and I think you're right to the point where it's so prevalent that I don't think it's a guerrilla marketing tactic. I think it's the printer has a hard time keeping things under wraps, and then as a result, things get leaked. And once they get spread onto the internet, they go like wildfire, don't they?
Yeah, they do.
And no holding it back. And so, yeah, I kind of like you. I think it's just there's just no good way for the printer to keep this information discreet because it's so easy where somebody with a camera just takes a snapshot of the. Because I remember it happened with Ixalan too, where they took pictures of like a printed sheet before it got cut. I know that War of the Spark had leaks where people saw like printed sheets of like of cards long in advance. So yeah, like I think it's not a question of it being guerrilla marketing anymore. There was a time where I think that might have occurred, right? Luck, did you agree? Can you think of an instance where like Wizards might have done guerrilla marketing where they like seeded packs with like set cards from other sets?
And I can think of one instance, and I never told this story, but a while back, years ago, like this happened at another LGS that I used to go to, and before this one, it was in Gate Crash and like it was a Great Crash draft, and that we had
Yeah.
gotten a couple of boxes, and I kid you not, there were we were opening up packs, and there were cards with a different symbol, and turns out these were Dragon's Maze cards in packs of Gate Crash.
Interesting. That's anything good or just more garbage? Dragon's Maze garbage.
Well, the main stuff that people were opening were like the guild champions and like the maze runners.
Oh, okay. So like at least interesting cards.
Like I remember that, and I opened up one pack because and I was going to try to go in a Boros, and I ended up opening Mirko Vosk.
That's disappointing. that's disappointing. You had the diametrical opposite card. All right. I know that they've done some of that. Like for instance, when they just like they were looking to preview conspiracy, they had seeded some conspiracy cards in pre-release packs for. Don't quote me on it. Maybe Dragons of Tarkir. I don't know, but for some set where they snuck in some cards from conspiracy, and that drew a lot of attention, which is good. But I don't think that's where we're at these days. This is just the printer can't keep things under wraps, and camera pictures of sheets or cards end up going wild. So.
And of course, I was going to say is remember in that one instance where someone claimed they said they had pulled a card from Guilds of Ravnica in a Core 19 pre-release kit.
I heard something that somebody opened something from like a Walgreens or something. Like they bought packs and they opened up sets for like cards from a different set entirely altogether. So I've heard some of that happens, and I mean some of that might be collation errors, but I think more often than not this is like like legitimately just like it's difficult to keep things under wraps. That's my thought. All right. Anything else you want to say on the leaks?
And all I'll say is that if you're shown leaks, just they don't spread the word. They keep them to yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, like if you see something out there, folks, like you're under no compulsion to have to share that. And I know there are some people who've got themselves in big trouble if they like when they like trace it back and found out who was the one disseminating leaks. Like people got themselves in big trouble.
Yeah,
All right.
because I was just gonna mention that some
Mhm.
of the servers I'm in that have Magic players, they've been posting leaks nonstop, and like every time there's something like green, they tag me in it, and I time after time I've asked them not to. Like I don't want to see that stuff.
No, fair enough. Like, and yeah, no, I get it. It makes sense to me. Makes sense. You don't if there is going to a chance for like we don't want it. Like, we're going to see the cards soon enough anyway, folks. Like the cards are going to come out one way or another come the end of the month. Like what's really a few extra days? Like I appreciate like if you're into the finance game and you wanna make a few extra bucks buying that cool dwarf or that cool whatever, but generally speaking, the net gain is low, and the consequences if they track back to you somehow is could be significant. So I'm just not sure it's worth the trouble. So I don't really pay much attention to the leaks, although some of the leaks looked pretty good. I'd like to talk about them, but hopefully the preview comes soon enough and we can discuss them soon. So all right, we done on talking leaks?
Yep.
All right, so the rest of this discussion is going to be talking about basically some guidelines for people going forward to try and help make their game situations more fun. And because here's what's happening, folks. Not a lot of people are able to gather to play Commander the way we used to. All right, because we can't meet in person with our friends as readily as we might like. I know there are people who are out there who are still doing it, but generally speaking, we can't. So what is happening is a lot of people have migrated to playing webcam EDH, which is great. But what it means is it likely means that your play group is far broader than it ever used to be. Right? You would only encounter this number of people if you would go to a GP or like a command fest or something like that. But now we're talking about, any night of the week, you could climb on a Discord server and like you could go play like on Play EDH. It's big. Like it's got thousands of players and you want to play any time of day, you can find somebody. But because you're playing with people all over the world who have all different conceptions of how the game ought to be played, there are different expectations for how things ought to go, what's okay, what's not okay, and just the possibility for some really negative actions. So there's been a lot of people commenting on Twitter, but other social media platforms too, about um, some of the less savory elements of these sort of interactions. And I thought maybe it'd be worth our while since we might be. I think here at Lux, I sort of envision some of the people listening to our podcast as being newer to playing Commander. Would you sort of agree that's sort of who we sort of figure we're catering to most part?
And honestly, and I think that's probably who's listening to us mostly, because we're basically about getting that starting point, finding a budget friendly deck to basically use as your foundation for your own.
Exactly. So we're your entry point into the format, so to speak. And so some of our listeners may not have had these experiences going forward out into these other communities and playing more broadly. So just some ways to help protect you and make sure that you don't have too many negative experiences with other players out there. Through one of these many various services that are playing cool stuff. So whether it's in person or on a webcam, you can have a good time. All right. So the first one we have, first point is your pregame discussion. All right. And I think this is probably more important than ever. I don't want to call it rule zero because some people are calling it rule zero and just saying, well, have your discussion, blah, blah, blah. I don't want to call it a rule. Like, this should be your conversation with people beforehand. And I've noticed like it's more and more important, particularly with people you don't know, to be able to articulate and have this discussion in a way that is succinct, but also clear. So, once upon a time, Lux, do you remember when they would try to assign a deck a number from like 1 to 10?
And I do.
So, Lux, how would you describe the power level of your decks? Just thinking generally, how would you describe them?
And I'm thinking somewhere in the middle, like maybe like 5 or 6.
Okay, I think that's nonsense because we have no idea what your 6 looks like versus my 6. So if I sit down with a 6 and my 6 absolutely crushes your 6, did I have a 6? Did you have a 6? We don't really know. I think the number system is utter nonsense. I'm going to call it right now. I think it's BS that we shouldn't really be choosing to talk about this gradient scale of 1 to 10. What I think, and I've sort of switched my discussion to, is what is your intent? All right. So what is your intent behind your deck? All right. Don't give me a number. If a guy comes and tells you I run a 6, that's okay. No, like tell me more. Tell me more about what your deck wants to do. Don't tell me, oh, I want to. I'm a 6. I play fair magic. Like that doesn't tell me anything. So ask them like, what does your deck want to do? How does your deck look to win? And be upfront. Like say like, do you play combo? Are you gonna what are you gonna do? Like, do you play stacks? What ask some of these hard questions. People may not want to answer you because they think you're actually trying to angle shoot for like win percentage or something here. It's not a question of win percentage. All right. Firmly of the opinion that the clearer you can articulate what your game plan of your deck is, the better it is going to be for the play experience of your table. All right. So yeah, I can appreciate you don't want to say, well, I'm going to try and combo out with this and this, but you can say, oh, I have infinite mana combos using a couple of pieces, or I have a stasis lock, or I have winter, or I'm going to winter orb you into oblivion. Like you can go ahead and like share this sort of information, people, so they know what to expect. Like I really think like it's a hard conversation to have. But if everybody gets in the habit of asking, like, what is the intention behind your deck? What does it want to do? And if you share what your deck's going to do, you're going to find you're more often than not your opponents are going to reciprocate and tell you, oh yeah, okay, so this is what my deck wants to do. And once you've reciprocated and shared that sort of information back and forth, started to build some of that rapport, what they're able to do with their deck, and you're going to be able to know what you're going to be at least in for, so that you're going to be in a better position to play the game. If you keep it close to your chest and like, I don't want to tell them anything, well, now you just create a situation where like they're not going to trust you. They think that like here's a great situation. People see Golos, right, Lux? If you see Golos, and what do they automatically assume?
And honestly, I can't really say because that's one of those cards that I've never seen in play.
Really? Because I'm going to tell you what I see when I see Golos. I think you're a degenerate piece of. I can't finish that sentence. So, but yeah. So like I see, but there are lots of ways to build Golos that is ultimately very fair and lots of fun. However, the unfortunate reality is that lots of people have built a Golos deck that is perhaps uninteractive, unfun, plays out the same way because you get to 7 mana, you spin the wheel, and you see what Golos reveals on the top of your deck. So, I mean, be upfront and like say like this is what my deck does. My deck wants to play silly sagas and be goofy, or I'm looking to combo out with here's my combo. I've got a couple of combo routes, whether it's, Kiki Jiki and Resto Angel, or I don't know, whatever else. But like, describe your game plan. And if you're not prepared to have that conversation, like, right from the get-go, your game is going to potentially be mired in some pretty ugly stuff. Then there's a topic of proxies, which I've seen come up a bunch of times. Now, Lux, what's your take on proxies?
And I'm honestly okay with him because there's a lot of cards out there that people just don't have the money for.
Absolutely. Like, I fully agree. Magic is a very expensive hobby, and building decks is expensive. I get it. But proxies help keep your costs down, and I would say more and more are being viewed as being not terrible for the community. Would you agree? Like, I think the attitude towards proxies has swung a great deal. Would you agree?
And pretty much, because honestly, they're not as harmful as some are making them out to be.
No, like proxies in and of themselves aren't harmful. What is harmful is people representing, like having fake cards and representing them as real cards. But a proxy that is, either a placeholder or a card that you're intending to, if you're testing out or something, I have no problem. I have no problems with. So there's like I do have stipulations, right? So one of the rules, like one of my play groups has, when we play in paper, is that if you own a copy of the card, you can proxy it, and I think that's a pretty reasonable way to handle it. That you own a copy of, and usually it's around mana bases. Like you own a copy of that bayou or that plateau or that scrubland that you want to put in multiple decks, but let's be honest, you're trying to save yourself some dollars, so you don't buy a million of them, you buy one and you proxy it into a bunch of decks saying, here's my placeholder for the card I own, here's my plateau or my whatever. The other one is like the testing one. Like if you're going to test, that's fine. I have no problem you testing a proxy and seeing if it's going to be any good before you go and buy something expensive. Like so, if you're looking to play some particularly expensive card, let's call it Chains of Mephistopheles, if only because I think the card is ridiculous. If Chains of Mephistopheles is expensive because it's on the reserve list but it's very old, but it may not. Like try it out, see if it's good for your deck, and if not, you haven't spent any money because you've gone and created a proxy. It would feel pretty terrible if you spent money on your Chains of Mephistopheles only to not actually like play with it because it's not what you want anymore. What does bother me though, Lux, is that when people go and proxy their deck so it's like a 10 out of 10 and just clown the people they're playing with. Like, would you agree like that's not really the spirit of why you would be proxying a card? Right, Lux? Would you agree? Like, that's not really why you should be proxying?
Yeah, pretty much.
Like obviously, if you're going to go play CEDH, you need you need to do that. They're pretty forgiving about it at the CEDH tables, generally too, from what I have understood. But if you're playing, with us here at the Epic Experiment Podcast, and you go and proxy in stuff to make your deck a 10, like you're not going to have a lot of fun because you're going to clobber us. But it's also not a lot of fun because you've not really followed like the sort of the spirit of why one would proxy. So proxy responsibly, people, and you're going to see, I think, more often than not, people are going to be okay with it if you're using it responsibly and in sort of the ways we have described earlier. Another one that drives people crazy, and well, it drives me crazy. I don't know about you, Lux, but if you win a game, act like you've won a game before. Like act like you've done this before. It's not a new or creative experience. Have you seen somebody at the table, Lux, who you would describe as being not particularly sportsmanlike after they've won a game?
And honestly, no, I haven't.
Wow, Lux. Jeez, must be nice. So, give you a story here, folks. I was playing a couple of years ago at a friend's house. We were playing, for our monthly game, and we had a friend of a friend, came over to play with us because he played Commander and heard that we played Commander, and he sat down with his deck, and very quickly we ascertained the power level was kind of like out of control for the table. And he resolved an Intuition, which is a reserve list card, and I'm going to pull it up here because it's very powerful. and it's very good. So intuition is search your library for 3 cards and reveal them. Target opponent chooses one, put that card into your hand, and then put the rest into your graveyard, and then shuffle your library. So our opponent here at this table casts Intuition and goes and gets Zur the Enchanter, Razakath, and Jin-Gitaxias. Well, I look at these 3 cards, and the player who is picking which is going to put in their hand, says, okay, put that one in your hand. I forgot which order it was. But needless to say, in very short order, all 3 were on the battlefield and going wild. And we were just done. Like, essentially, he had Intuition for his win con right there. We all had to discard our hand because of Jin-Gitaxias. He could tutor whenever he wanted with Razakath, and Zur was just going to pull up anything he wanted. And that's fine if he had acted like he'd actually done this before. But then he's laughing at the table about having done this to us. And like in a way that was clearly demeaning and clearly like it upset my friend who's the host, it upset my brother who's playing there. And I was also really upset about it too. I'm like, that's not really sporting, like to be perfectly honest. Like we have a thing up here in Canada, like when you're playing hockey, don't oversell your call. Like don't over celebrate. All right? You scored a goal. Act like you scored a goal before. Same thing in Magic. Act like you've won a game. So yeah, sure. If you've just had a huge drawn out slugfest with your table and you come out on top, sure. Like you're allowed to be excited or to be emotional about it. Say, yes, that's great. That was a fun game. That was great. But like when you just obviously clowned a bunch of people who were not ready for you to do that, like don't laugh at them. Like act like you've won a game before. So whether or not like you might have this happen in a game of Commander over the internet, who knows? You may encounter some winners who are poor at winning, but at the very least, don't be that person. Like, don't be that person who's selling their garbage play or their garbage win. Like save that for when you've actually had a reason to celebrate. So, does that sound fair, Lux?
And it's like you said, Nun. They don't over celebrate, Nun. They just said they act like it's something you've done before.
Seriously, like just it's not hard. It's not hard to say, yeah, like go. Yikes, that one sure got away on us, didn't it? Say something like but don't be that person. Like it's not cool. Not cool. That's a surefire way to get you like be not welcome back. And like in this form of like with web EDH, if you sit down with someone and they recognize that like you're the guy who did that to them, then they're just gonna like, I'm just gonna sign off the call here. I'll go somewhere else. And then your game never gets off the ground. So let's not be getting into that. Number 4, don't misrepresent your deck. All right, so in that pregame discussion we talked about up there, the reason I separated these so I didn't like go with these back to back, but there's a lot of people who, for whatever reason, misrepresent what their deck is able to do. Lux, have you ever seen somebody who's misrepresented their deck?
And once again, no, this is something I haven't seen.
Jeez, maybe I've been circulating the wrong circles, but I have seen a number of people who have said, okay, my deck is, this is what my deck does, but they never once mentioned the fact they've got just some horrible, horrible thing in there that's just going to derail the whole game. And, okay, look, folks, I get it. Like, accidents happen. You forget that card, or you were not anticipating that card was going to do that. But because of circumstances, because of other cards that were on the table, basically you end up in a situation where something terrible happens. Everyone gets locked down. You can't do anything, and creates a big problem. Okay, that happens. Like that's an oops. But if you intentionally put like stuff a combo in there, and you said, "Well, I don't have any combos," or you put some you put a winter orb and some stacks pieces in there, and like, oh, I don't play stacks, and sure enough, you stacks your opponents into the ground. Like, yeah, now you just lied about your deck, and that's pretty poor form. Now you are a jerk. You are that person, and the table's gonna they have a problem now, and the problem is that you are a pain in the butt, and you can't really be trusted. So with lots of things, like as part of that pregame, like be honest, be upfront, and like we all want a fun game, and not for you to prove that you're a jerk. So don't misrepresent your deck. Like if you honestly think that your deck is like overpowered for what your opponents are doing, what they're describing to you, like say so. Say, I'm not sure this deck is going to be a great fit for what we're doing. Like, or like, don't try and conceal the fact that you've got stuff. Like, because it feels bad, and it even feels worse when you like pull punches and like, oh, I'm not going to cast my thing because I don't want to. Like, it's much better all the way around if you just don't misrepresent what your deck is able to do and say it up front. Any thoughts on that, Lux? Seem reasonable, or you think I'm just being unreasonable here?
And like it's reasonable because I remember like when I first started running Jockle Hops, I made sure that I told everyone that it was in the deck.
Yeah, like that's the sort of card you need. I think you need to tell people I'm running Jockle Hops. Like, don't tell them like, oh, I play mid range stuff, and then like you Jockle Hops the table and everyone's like, wait a second, what? No thanks. So yeah, like that's exactly. I think that's a great example. And last one is similar to being honest, like from don't misrepresent your deck. Also, like when you make a deal, do not renege on your deal. I know there are people out there that often break deals that they've made with other people. Like, let's not get into that game because that's garbage. All right, like that is poor. And I know the goal of the game is to play to win. And at some point, like truces and deals need to be broken. But like you don't need to rush out and do it like the first chance you get to backstab someone in the back. Like, just stick to your guns. I don't think it's too much to ask. It looks bad on you. It looks bad on you as a player. It looks bad on you as a person. Um, so like if you make a deal, and I know everyone says that, oh yeah, I stick to my guns, and then sure enough, like the first chance someone gets, they stab someone in the back and say, well, we're playing to win. Like, no, like if you said you weren't going to attack that person this turn, well, you better well stick to it and say, oh, okay, I will not attack, or I will destroy that thing I promised I would kill, even though it's no longer, the number one threat. I wish I could kill your thing, but like, don't back out. Like, Lux, have you seen people who have backed out of deals?
And this one I have seen, and it actually happened to me once.
And like, it sucks, doesn't it? Like, it makes it.
Yeah.
Did it make you mad?
And it actually did because what was happening? And I was playing my Simic Tokens deck, and this guy was using a Simic deck. Like we were going up against two in the Sultai decks. Well, we decided to form an alliance, and they agree not to do anything to each other to try to take out those two guys because they were trying to combo out. Well, and a few turns later, the guy decides to board wipe me because my forces were getting too big for his liking, and he thought I was going to try to attack him. And he leaves me wide open for attack, and I get taken out.
Gross. Yeah, like that's something that leaves you hot under the collar. Like, but dude. So, like, I mean, I know eventually it would have had to be broken eventually, but like, yeah, it just leaves me hot under the collar, and like, it's going to be a surefire way to make other people hot under the collar too. So stick to your words, stick to your guns, and until like you really can't, like, so you lived up to your end of the bargain, or like, it's no longer tenable to maintain it. But yeah.
Yeah, because like I was saying, he could have saved that board wipe for when we took out the two Sultai players.
Yeah, save it for when your head's up, or at the very least when one of the Sultai guys is done and the other one is obviously on the way out. And so, okay, now I want to assert my dominance on the board. Okay, I'll take out the Sultai player, point the wipe at you, and then away we go. But yeah, no, like it's very frustrating. So out there in the audience, there, folks, you're just like, don't be that person, the person who does these things, and because you're going to get a lot of heat from other people at the table. I know it seems really simplistic, but the bottom line becomes, it's so easy to forget that these things are out there, that people are looking for these sorts of tenants to be, adhered to just basic conduct with other people. So please keep it in mind. Do not be that person. Do not be a jerk. You're going to find that if you're not a jerk, people are going to want to play with you a hell of a lot more often than if you are a complete and utter bozo. Because I can know for a fact, if you're a bozo and like people like you're a pain in the butt to play with because you break deals, you misrepresent your deck, you are a bit of a poor winner. Like people are just not going to ask you to come play. They're like, yeah, no, I don't want to play with that guy. He's a bit of a jerk. So, come on, folks, be better than that. Be better people. All right. Anything else you want to add, Lux, or should we move on to our segment 3?
And let's try to move on.
All right, we got to burn through some stuff tonight. It's a good call. So we're looking at Ultimate Masters tonight. So Ultimate Masters came out. If I remember right, it was a bit of a surprise. We weren't really anticipating yet another Masters set. And this one had a number of legendary creatures. It was a bit surprising, some of them. So we had Tassiger the Golden Fang, Talran Sky Summoner, Shirei Shinzo's Caretaker, Garda Host of Herons, Gaddock Teague, Mikaeus the Unhallowed, which is the Black Mikaeus, Kozilek Butcher of Truth, which is the old school Kozilek from Worldwake, Garna the Bloodflame, Ulamog the Infinite Gyre, Squee Goblin of Bob, Leovold Emissary of Trest, Rhea Dawnbringer, and Emrakul the Aeon's Torn. So we got the 3 old school Eldrazi Titans and a bunch of other guys. And these are all interesting commanders. Are there any of these ones that jump out at you, Lux, in terms of their inclusion in the set, how popular they are? Because, I mean, like, the leading commander is Tassiger the Golden Fang at 2,200 decks. Like, are there any of the commanders here that surprise you in terms of how often they are built or how infrequently they are built?
And honestly, the one that surprises me, of course, is Squee, because I'm always hearing about Squee.
I don't think this is the version of Squee people build. I think they build the Squee from where's the Squee? Because that's not the Squee from Dominaria, is it? No, that's not it. That's the older one. So the Immortal Squee or something like that is the other one. Man, I wish I could keep my squeeze straight. Goodness.
Yeah, because
but anyway, yeah. Go ahead. Oh, where's Squee? Oh, I can't see. I can't find Squee. Let's look for Squee. Squee the Immortal is the one from Dominaria. That's the one I thought. So Squee the Immortal, I think, is the one that is perhaps more often played because it's a little bit bigger. It's a 2/1. Still gives you all the same sort of, playability. So anyway, I kind of feel like Squee Goblin of Bob is a little bit surprising how little it's built, but I think in part because it's built, like they build the other one instead. Let's just check the stats on Squee the Immortal. It has 123 decks, so it's hardly outrageous either, but got more. Anyway, interesting stuff. But yeah, so Squee's got 40 decks according to Ultimate Masters. Some of that could be by virtue of the fact that it's that's only EDH Rec only compiles stats in the last couple of years. One that I'm surprised has that as many decks as it has is Garn of the Bloodflame, which I think is a good card, but I'm surprised that it has the number of decks that it's got at almost 200, getting close to 180 decks. That's a little bit surprising to me, but right. Interesting set. Lots of great cards in Ultimate Masters, and if you ever were to find a box at a reasonable price, like you could do some fun things with that for sure. Um, there's also two band commanders, which is hilarious. And you have Emrakul the Aeon's Torn, and you have Leovold Emissary of Trest. And I'm not surprised that either of those was banned. Are you, Lux? Lux, you're muted.
Sorry, I didn't. Have I been talking that entire time?
I don't know if you have. I was filling space, but we're talking about the band cards. You think? Are you surprised that Emrakul or Leovold are banned?
And no, I'm not, because those cards are just, yeah.
Yeah, that's the word. They're not fun. Emrakul is Emrakul. Like once you can resolve it, is absurd. But the one that's more problematic is almost Leovold. Leovold's just heinous to resolve because it just results in people not having cards, doesn't it?
And pretty much.
Like, because okay, so if anyone's not familiar, so Leovold has got the casting cost is irrelevant. Like, but it says each opponent can't draw more than one card each turn. That's the text on Narset, and it's super punishing when because it goes in a deck full of wheel effects, and your opponents can't wheel because they can't draw cards. So they just discard. So things like Teferi's Puzzle Box or Windfall or whatnot, just unfun. And now I'm sure this deck would have like Hull Breacher in it and all the unfun things to just ruin drawing cards. So I'm not surprised that Leovold got himself banned a rue. Uh, so the deck this week we was built was Shirei, which was loading for me. Shirei, Shinzu's Caretaker, which is an interesting commander in its own right, and is very very inexpensive. So if you want to see the deck list, the deck list will be in the show notes. You can of course go check it out on Moxfield.com. And of course you can find all of our decks available there. Looking for the username the Epic Experiment Podcast. So Shirei, Shinzo's Caretaker, is 4 and a black for a 2/2 legendary creature spirit. And it says, whenever a creature with power 1 or less is put into your graveyard from the battlefield, you may return that card to the battlefield at the beginning of the next end step if Shirei, Shinzo's Caretaker, is still on the battlefield. So you're looking for things with 1 power that have interesting abilities. So there's lots of those cards that exist out there in Magic. So you're getting things like Blood Artist, Burglar Rats, Carrion Feeder. Carrion Feeder is interesting because it's a sack outlet. Cauldron Familiar. Cryptghast is a mana ramp card, but also pretty interesting. Doom Dissenter, Dust Legion Zealot, and on and on and on we go. So a lot of this deck is predicated on having Shirei out in play and 1 mana things on the battlefield so that you can then have them die or sacrifice them and have them return to play with Shirei's ability. All right, that's the whole premise of the deck. And so, you get things that are going to help you sacrifice things like Vampiric Rites, Smothering Abomination, Ultra of Dementia, which is a terrific one that is out of Modern Horizons and is only costing us like $3.50, which is a pittance compared to what it actually does. Like free sack outlets are hugely important. But you also get things like Skull Clamp and Witch's Oven, which if you need to sacrifice things like these, draw you cards, get charades to trigger, and have these things returned to the battlefield. So pretty straightforward build, I think, on the whole. Lux, having a look at the list, any thoughts on what Shirei is offering?
And like it looks into pretty good, knowing the solid mono black deck.
Yeah, I mean it has a lot of your typical stuff. Some inexpensive removal. So you get your Doomblade. Defile is one that I really like out of Modern Horizons. That is like 1 mana, and then if you're playing a heavy black deck, like you're gonna kill something dead pretty readily. You're gonna get dragged to the underworld, which is if you can get a couple of creatures with some black mana pips on the battlefield, then you're gonna get to essentially kill something pretty easily for just black. Um, you'll get things like Farika's Libation, and you're gonna get Feed the Swarm as other inexpensive ways to kill things dead. You get some board wipe stuff with Crux of Fate. So lots of interesting things going on here. Of course, you can because you're monocolored, you can spend some resources on getting like a Westvale Abbey and doing some fun stuff with it. So yeah, no, it's interesting. It's a fun deck. I wasn't sure when I started sitting down to sketch it out if it made sense, but I think the more I look at it, the more I'm like, huh, yeah, okay, like it's definitely got a game plan. The biggest hinge is whether or not you can keep Shirei on the battlefield or not, and you have that's the biggest question. Can you keep Shirei on the battlefield? Hopefully you can. And if you can, then you're going to be doing well. And if you can't, well, this deck may struggle because you don't have a lot of alternate win cons, do you, Lex?
No, not really.
Well, I did put one. I put Revel in Riches as a way because if you're going to be having a lot of things die, Revel in Riches triggers. But you never know. Like it could be one of those things where it's hard to come across the enough treasure tokens to trigger Revel in Riches. Who knows? But it's worth a shot, I think. Anyway, any other thoughts?
No, not really.
So check out the list, folks. The list costs you $82. It's you $82 to get you in the game, and playing. You got a deck, you got a plan, you've got a line of play that what you want to enact, what you want to do, which is important. All right. So I think as a starting point, you could do worse than having something that's the mana base is reasonably affordable because you're playing 25 swamps at like under 10 cents a swamp, and so you can splurge on some of those more utility lands that in multiple color decks we can't really go for yet. But you can play a Castle Lockfleet, you can play a Crypt of Agadeem, you can play a Cabal Stronghold, and sort of invest a little bit in some of that mana base that you couldn't normally do, and you can do that because you're playing mono black. Like you've got monocolored requirements, you can splash for a few more of those, utility lands that are gonna help your deck move along with stuff. All right. Anything else, Lux, or should we wrap it up this week's show?
And let's wrap it up.
All right. So I'm going to bring this week's show to a bit of a close. I know it's a bit of a shorter episode than usual. I know next week we're going to be a little bit longer because we're going to have call time stuff to go over. But still, thank you very much for joining us for this week's show. If you want to leave us some feedback or hit us up and comment on anything, by all means, please email us at theepicexperimentpodcast@gmail.com. We'd love to get emails from our listeners. So even if it's just to say hi, please just send us something. If you want to hit us up on Twitter, which is probably the best way to reach us, you can find us on Twitter at @epicexpcast. And of course, you can check out all of our decks on Moxfield.com and looking for the username The Epic Experiment Podcast. As always, on whatever platform you're listening to us on, whether it's iTunes, Google Podcasts, Amazon, Spotify, thelowestcouncil.com, iHeartRadio, or one of the many other platforms that we seem to be on, please, as always, like, comment, subscribe, follow, all those good things. Just interact with us and help spread the word just a little bit further that we are here every week talking Commander with you and loving it. So we'd love to hear from you. Can't wait for you guys to hit us up and talk to us about what's going on, whether you agree with are don't be that person or not. So next week we're gonna be back. We're gonna be talking about a brand new set. We'll be talking some call time previews, I'm sure. We'll have a deck for you as always, but that is until next week. Until then, this is the Epic Experiment Podcast signing off, wishing you all the best wherever you next play Magic. Thanks very much, everybody. Take care. Have a good night.